With the studio albums, well, I'd like to think so, because I've mastered, remastered right across the board for every sort of aspect of what would be the things could necessarily be heard on. Originally, analog tapes were for vinyl, and then CDs came along. We remastered 20 years ago for CDs, but now it's right across the board. There's sort of digital and different forms of that as well. I didn't actually master for MP3 file, remaster for that, but everything else was looked at. Yeah, so I'd like to think so. In actual fact, there's even files which is really super duper high res for whatever may come along. You almost have to reassess how your music is being heard and make sure that you've addressed whatever that is, whatever the files are needed or whatever. You have to really reassess. That's something I certainly have learned. 20 years since the last remastering, there's just been so many different changes in the way that people hear things. I'd call it a necessity. I'm the knowledgeable one. You know, I'm the authoritative one, because I was there before the group started, and I know exactly what was recorded, and I had reference mixes from the studio, the studio dates that I did. I was in the studio more times than the others because I was a producer, you see. So that's why I had such a cachet and archive of material to be able to sort of go through. I do know the history of the band, and I do know how things were recorded and for what they were recorded for, whether it's in a live capacity or the studio albums. So yeah, there was a responsibility to the Led Zeppelin legacy, if you like, that I felt akin with, because I was there and I didn't really want to see it messed about with. I knew I had a pretty good memory recall, but I was surprised just how detailed my memory recall was across those decades. Well, it sort of started because I wanted to archive all the material that I had that was in analog form. So I even had sort of tapes of my own material and early songs that I did when I was still living with my parents. It went right through to that. And of course, as it went through chronologically, it got to the point, I went through all the Yardbirds things, and then it got to the point where the Led Zeppelin things started to pop up. I could see a project for it. I actually had an idea that was along these lines. It was slightly different, and it wasn't so extensive, but around the time of the Led Zeppelin DVD that I had an idea, which I won't tell you exactly what it was, but it did involve these things, and nobody could understand it. Nobody could understand what it was that I was saying. That includes the managements of the time. Oh, that's fair enough. And so the idea sort of resuscitated. It gave it more of intrigue to be able to put out, to be able to remaster. That was essential to remaster for all the different formats, the catalogue. But that's not unique, although I don't know whether everyone does it all at once. I don't care. But what I do know, to have this project whereby you can have a companion disc to each of the audios that you know from before, each of the albums, that give all this sort of insight to the recording, or at least the atmospherics. It shows the work that went into the studio masters, as you know them, and the alternate versions and different songs entirely that have never been heard. It's a wonderful portal. It's a great window in. I knew it was such a long task to do, but I knew that if it was pulled off, and I'd convinced myself that I would, but because of the succession of releases which have been superb and fine, of live recordings, it was the thing that was missing, to have this sort of area, this insight, this access into the studio world, and I knew it was a hefty task to do, but I just knew how the fans were going to love it when it came out, and now it is so great. I knew that within the sort of my archive and the tape collection that I had, all the analog tapes, that there were some real gems. I knew that, and I knew that we were far enough away now from the last set of re-releases of sort of the 20-year ago ones of the studio albums for CD. And even though I'd tried to put forward an idea at the time of the DVD, that's Led Zeppelin DVD, that's some years back, I thought, well, now enough time has passed to be able to present this project and complete it and know that it's the right thing to do. There's two ways of doing it. There's sort of going back to the multi-tracks and then starting to do all of that, or actually the way that I saw it was to have all of the, to revisit all of the tapes that were the ones that were done as alternate mixes or guide tracks, backing tracks or early stages, to revisit all of those because it's true and faithful to the time when the album was recorded. So if you've got a whole bulk of things that are there for Led Zeppelin 3, it's great because it's a time capsule. That's why it works. That's why this thing has real substance to it. And if you go to the stuff of Physical Graffiti, it's a time capsule for that. So that's it. You know, I knew it was right. I knew it was long. I knew it was a seriously demanding labour, demanding on time and attention and focus, but it had to be done, and now it is done. It was really enjoyable. It was just so good to hear these, you know, to hear the musicians, you know, John Bonham, John Paul Jones and Robert Plant and even Jimmy Page all just flying, absolutely flying to at an altitude that there was no other group at the time that were doing that, or could. They just couldn't, you know, so. Yeah, it's always wonderful to hear it. With the searching and the detailed searching, believe me, I left no stone unturned. I was even checking out whatever had come out on bootleg that had leaked out of studios or whatever in the past. Not by us, I might add, but I wanted to make sure that the material that I was going to present wasn't already out there on bootleg. And yeah, and that was a successful hunt because, and it was obviously the right thing to do. I knew what I was looking for, and things would crop up. I mean, Keys to the Highway, I knew that we'd done it. I didn't remember that Robert started singing Trouble in Mind halfway through it. Do you know what I mean? But my recall of the fact that I got him set up singing through one of my amplifiers through the vibrato channel, and they used playing harp as well as singing. I had a good recall of it, but it was still a wonderful surprise to hear it. But it wasn't like I didn't know I'd recorded it. But nevertheless, the subtleties in it were just wonderful and reassuring to hear. That, you know, they're really charming. They're really quite magical. The only thing that turned up that I didn't know, that I'd literally forgotten out of all of these tapes and hundreds of hours of listening, was that I had an early mix of all of the studio mix of Presence, and that had extra material on it, and that was the one album I thought, with all of this whole chronological opening of everything, that might present a problem, and lo and behold, there it was. It was a Deliverance, and that's the only one. That's the only thing. So that was pretty good. Yes, when I was a studio musician, obviously I spent my time really learning a lot. I was fascinated by, as much as playing guitar, as how things were recorded, and I learnt a lot. I made it my business to learn a lot. And by then, I mean, even from the very first studio date that I did, I had to be very disciplined. So I had that whole studio discipline, because I mean, if you didn't have that, you wouldn't be seen again. And I did it for 2.5 years, so I was pretty, you know, I was obviously pretty focused. And I learnt to read music during that whole period and write music. What we were doing with the Yardbirds, especially over here, I'd seen, we were trapped in England. We had a producer who was superb for singles, but it wasn't superb. The sort of choices that he was making for the Yardbirds were like mixing oil and water. Just wasn't working. And we would be able to sort of feel as though we were saving ourselves by doing a B-side, which was more in character with what we were doing. It was all a bit hopeless and desperate, and I really didn't like all of that, you know, singles market, and you could see how that carries on through the Led Zeppelin years. I didn't want to get caught up in a whole AM situation when I saw the emergence of the FM radio, where they were playing stereo and stereo albums and tracks and selected tracks, and I could see that if you had an album with sufficient different colours and approaches to music, you're going to get the whole side played. And that's how it was going, and I knew that in the Yardbirds. And I was rather disappointed because we were doing the whole of the underground circuit, all those sort of famous venues that we know now. And I was doing all the tricks. I was playing with the bow. I had sort of tapes going on the stage with all sort of like actually the Staten Island ferry coming into port or embarking or whatever, and railroad trains. I mean, real wacky stuff was going on here. Nevertheless, we were playing Dazed and Confused at that point, and within the recording process there was acoustic being featured. A lot of all of the first 4 albums of Led Zeppelin, they're actually written on acoustic guitar, as much as electric, but there's a real backbone of acoustic right through everything. So it was all part of me, the acoustic. I didn't want them to fold. I was trying to encourage them to stay together, but I mean, Keith had just had enough of the Yardbirds. He probably had enough of the guitar changes of different people too, and you know, I had to be sympathetic and respectful to that. But I sort of knew what I knew by that point, and sure, I wanted to form a band. I knew exactly, I had the numbers like Babe, I'm Gonna Leave You. I had the whole of the arrangement and the concept of that. I knew that it was that sort of dynamics, and also the aspect of actually not using, because the bow was never a gimmick for me, it was something which you could make music and extend the whole possibilities of the guitar. That's what it was about. So employing all of these things. Yeah, I'd done it in the Yardbirds, but now I was going to be able to play all of these guitar styles that I had really as a real tour de force. We never got good reviews from Rolling Stone, whether it was the first album, second album, third album, whether it was the couple of concerts in LA, all reviewed by the same guy, and they were just really hatchet jobs. And maybe he thought he was important, but I'll tell you something, that I wanted to reproduce his articles within the framework of these releases. And Rolling Stone were all right with it, because there were 5 reviews, and he refused to allow us to use it. I wanted to actually use at least one of them, the first album, and have like the Rolling Stone, because they were all right with it, and then have the blurred image of his review, because it's all over the internet anyway. But the rest of the band didn't want to do that. I thought, oh, come on, guys, you know. But that one reviewer in Rolling Stone, he was just poisonous, and he wasn't even worth following, you know, as far as what his opinions were. Not as a musician, I can tell you. It became quite apparent as time went on, and reviews were from here and there and all over the world, that we got good reviews on the albums, because some people actually got it. They got the idea that because we weren't locked into a singles market, we had more freedom to be able to explore each album, and that's how it quite clearly was. They started to get it. However, there were other reviewers, and I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt here, that they weren't just trying to be sort of clever guys, you know, and actually they were stupid. If they only had a short time to review the album, along with maybe 3 or 4 other albums, and this is their allotted space, because they've got to get their copy to go into the print, you know, for the editor, and then it goes to print. Well, of course, they would have great difficulty. Instead of just throwing all the other albums away that they had to review and just really listen to what was going on the Led Zeppelin, they just probably didn't have time. And because we weren't in the singles market, so there's an immediate point of reference all the time, by the time the 3rd album comes out, they're going, well, they've gone acoustic because Crosby, Stills and Nash are acoustic, or whatever, you know? And the reality of it is, yeah, but hang on a minute, the acoustic's all over the first album and the second album, and where's Whole Lot of Love? Yeah, well, you've got Since I've Been Loving You, and you've got the Immigrant Song. Yeah, it was just a nonsense, but it's quite amusing. What I didn't want to do was be doing the lyrics, because I wasn't really confident about my lyrics. On the second album, where you've got Living, Loving, Made, that's a lot of my lyrics on that. And, you know, they're pretty... There was a level of sarcasm that I knew that was underneath a lot of my lyrics. I didn't necessarily think that with a... Well, this is the way I saw it. I could quite clearly be misguided on this, but the way I saw it was that whoever was coming in to be the singer, I wanted to encourage them to write their lyrics, the lyrics that they would sing. Because after a while, my lyrics weren't going to sit like 3 or 4 albums in, as well as if they were doing their own. It was a really important thing to bring Robert on as a writer. It got to the point where, on Thank You, I'd got the Little Drops of Rain bit as a lyric, and he said, you know, I'd like to take this. I said, you go ahead, and so that's where he had a real sort of run on the lyrics on that. It's cool, huh? Robert was really coming on with all the lyrics. It showed that he was really growing within this situation, but equally each and every one of us was with our techniques. I mean, we were flying. With Led Zeppelin, I must say that each and every one of us were on, you know, on the same sort of level as far as musical sort of abilities and technique. Certainly by the time we're into the first album. Not so much necessarily beforehand that we were all sort of, that we all equated, but what I can tell you is that, as I said, that it was a tour de force for the guitar, this album, and it was meant to be so. But I can tell you that, you know, with all that remarkable talent of John Bonham, he never had the opportunity to play the drums like John Bonham wanted to play. I mean, can you imagine any other incarnation that he played in prior to that, where he played the drums like he's playing on Good Times, Bad Times? Of course not, he never had the vehicle to do so. And it was the same with John Paul Jones, who was a really accomplished musician, but he'd never had the chance to be involved in a unit like this. Same with Robert, so the excitement of it all was just infectious, and everyone was sort of gelling together and maturing within the whole concept of it. I knew it was really good to play, even when I was playing it on my own. Just really had a sort of raunch to it. It felt good. I didn't know whether it was really good on a universal plane, but I knew that it was going to be fun for people to play. I didn't sort of think at that point that it was going to be fun and inspire so much across decades. I mean, I've seen the Whole Lot of Love riff used with and footage mixed in with mashups, you know, on YouTube. So many different artists. Let's just say James Brown for the minute, one of them, and it's so cool. But the fact is, they've been inspired by hearing this riff, you know, and its interpretation within Led Zeppelin. It's cool, yeah. The importance of these alternate versions is that it showcases the role of the other musicians within this Led Zeppelin incarnation. I mean, it just really does. You can hear how important everybody's contribution is. Everyone, apart from the fact that they locked in this sort of synergy, because everybody's really listening and attentive to the music as it's going on. It was important to do this, to give this sort of window, this portal into this time frame of when each album is done, and just go to show just how important everybody's role is.